Hello and welcome to the first Bedrock panel of the academic year, with parents' evenings and open days mostly out of the way. This has been sort of the best time, although I know some of our panelists are on half term, so thank you very much. We're going to be looking at engaging students and parents and really looking at how do we engage them to improve whole school literacy, to create language-rich communities. And all of our panelists today, I should actually, because we've just got a couple of chats coming through, to say throughout, you can put messages in the chat on the right-hand side, also questions in the question tab. And at the very end of the webinar, once we've finished talking about our particular context and what strategies we've been using, we'll come to your questions and answer them to the best of our abilities. So all of our panelists today are committed to creating language-rich cultures within their schools, and I'm really, really pleased to introduce them. So I'm going to introduce them one by one. Unfortunately, Becky couldn't be here, extremely busy, as it always is at this time of year. But Joe, if you'd like to introduce yourself, explain a bit about your context, not too much because we've got a question about sort of our biggest challenges in each of our contexts coming up. But Joe.
My name is Joe Lane. I'm an assistant principal at Harris Academy, Peckham. So I work with the Harris Federation, but then obviously Peckham provides its own individual context as a mixed comprehensive and all the pupil premium context within the school that we work in. We have a big promotion of what we call Word within our academy, which is essentially literacy hyped up and implemented into everything that we do. And obviously we've been working with Bedrock now for about 3 years in terms of finding and trialing and erroring ways to make the practice work.
Fab, thank you, Joe. I should also add that Joe is an RS specialist as well. So obviously this is taking into account that we're not just all English teachers, as I'm sure you're aware. So I'm going to invite Kelly, if you'd like to introduce yourself and your context as well. Thank you.
Hiya, so I am from Beacon Academy, which is a non-selective state school based in Cranbrook in East Sussex. And similarly to Joe, we've been using Bedrock for about I would say about 3-4 years now, and we are really, really pleased, and we have been really pleased to see the way that our students have benefited from being exposed to all of this new vocabulary. And we draw our students from a range of different backgrounds. As I said, we are non-selective, so we have some students who are right on the cusp of being able to attend grammar school, so they will have passed their 11 plus. And we've had parents who've chosen to send their children to us instead. And we also have children who are at the other kind of end of the prior attainment spectrum, who really, really struggle with their literacy and come to us really, not being able to decode very well and having very low reading ages. So we have, kind of a real mixed bag really of different students. I think that's about it that I'll say.
Yeah, sounds like a genuine comprehensive. I also love how both you and Joe have really played down. I mean, I know in East Sussex, your Beacon Academy is really on a pedestal there. Whenever I speak to any school in East Sussex, they will say, yeah, Beacon are sort of leading in this, and with your teaching school status, that sort of comes in. And I know Harris Peckham have always been sort of leading in a lot of ways. Just generally, Harris being, forward thinking, and also the founder of Bedrock was the literacy coordinator at Harris when it used to be called literacy coordinator. So I know he'll be interested in hearing what you've got to say. SJ, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, so I'm SJ Eastwood. I am the head of English at Cranbrook Grammar School in Kent. We are quite a unique school in the sense that we're quite small. We're only 855 students. We are a co-ed state boarding school. There's only about 30 to 40 of those in the whole of the UK. And about a third of our children board, 2/3 a day. And our CAT schools, although we are a grammar school and we're selective, actually to make our boarding quotas up, we call ourselves a grammar school with a wider intake. So we have a large proportion of our children getting 141 in their verbal CAT scores, but we've also got some students who have got a verbal CAT score of 78. About 10% of our school are EAL because of our borders from all over the country, sorry, not all over the country, all over the world. And also because we have a large sixth form and we don't have a high proportion of disadvantaged children, and we're a grammar school, our funding has been dramatically cut over a period of time, and so a big part of improving literacy in the school had to come with very little cost to it. And I absolutely love the Bedrock programme. I had it in my last school, and when I became head of English and moved to this school, I brought it over with me. So I've been with Bedrock for about 5 years now. So yeah, I think that's about it. Thanks.
Yeah, and also just as with the other schools, I know Cranbrook, you do sort of outreach with your feeder schools with the, is it Cranbrook partnerships? I think we might have lost her. We'll go on to the next one, and I'm sure she can clarify later, SJ. So I have read quite a few articles recently on TES saying that actually I think the focus on engagement is wrong. It should be on high quality teaching and learning, and I would agree with that, and I'm sure all of you would agree that the focus should be on high quality teaching and learning. But actually the sort of learning aspect of it doesn't happen if we don't have that engagement to drive whole school literacy. So I've just put here the growth in language or acquisition and vocabulary knowledge that is gained by all students across Bedrock, to sort of focus. The reason why we're looking at engagement today is to show if they are fully engaged, then we will get SJ back soon. If they are fully engaged, then they're going to make that growth. So that's why we're kind of focusing on that today. Now, as with all things in schools and educational, it comes with its own obstacles. So, Joe, would you like to sort of outline what have been the obstacles that you face when it comes to engagement?
Sure. So the first obstacle that we faced when we were initially using Bedrock, or just a few months after that, was obviously the lockdown itself. So being able to ensure that students were engaging with Bedrock without not necessarily having to share access to ICT at home, but then also during COVID with a limited use of computers within our site. So a lot of what we had to do was ensure that students were scheduling either a time for them to do Bedrock themselves, to use their phone, to use it after school, because we couldn't necessarily get bums onto seats and get students doing Bedrock in a library or in a classroom like we would do now. The second, I think, would be, well, this relates to staff and students, but understanding the purpose of Bedrock itself. Initially for staff, it was just something that people did, and no one would necessarily realise the powerful tool that it was for teaching and learning of literacy. And equivalently for students, initially it just seemed like a homework that they had to do. And to actually see its benefit to a staff member for being able to actually teach better and see greater outcomes from their students in all subjects, or the capacity for a student to see its impact for them across all subject areas, particularly that second year vocabulary focus, was important to start building the buy-in.
Yes, I guess that comes with the so what. You know, students love to know why it's relevant to them, where it's going to come up, and actually, I'm kind of, you know, we jumped straight into Bedrock. Why do you want them to do it? But I'm guessing it's because you knew over lockdown that would get them reading. They'd be reading high quality texts. In terms of yeah, so yeah, thank you for that. We'll go to Kelly because SJ's lost her connection for now. Kelly, what have been your obstacles at school when it comes to engagement?
So I think for us, probably one of the main ones was similarly to what Joe said. We've had issues with students having access to technology and access to the right technology to be able to complete their Bedrock. So, you know, obviously the majority of students have like a mobile phone or something like that, but actually that isn't necessarily the most suitable device for them to be completing their lessons on. And that was a real issue for us, and especially during that period, as Joe said, during that lockdown and periods of school closure, where we would have maybe devices not working or students sharing devices within families. In addition to that, we've kind of had an issue where our cohort of students is so varied and so vast, and we have sort of pushing about 1,500 students from year 7 to year 11. We've had students who maybe have that slight lack of parental support, parental engagement. Parents, we understand, have very, very busy lives, and actually monitoring their child's homework and making sure that their child has a sort of a dedicated space and time to do it every single week is something that we had and have found difficult, and still do find difficult, to a kind of lesser extent. I think probably as well, and this is kind of touching on what Joe said, that trying to establish how important vocabulary is in that wider picture of literacy, kind of across the curriculum, not only for students but for other members of staff and teachers in other departments as well, has been a real issue for us, I think, probably over the last few years. And it's something that as a school we have been working and using. We've been working to really try and rectify that as well, because there's this whole kind of thing, and it's such a cliche, isn't it, that it's the English department's job to make sure that literacy is being improved and that students can read and write effectively, but actually it impacts the entire curriculum, and especially some of those humanities subjects and the subjects where students are having to produce quite lengthy responses for sort of their GCSEs and other assessments and things like that.
That is a very interesting point, and actually GL assessment, they sort of looked at NGRT data score, so a reading test, so they can look at the reading age of students, and they found it was a higher predictor for outcomes in maths than it was for in history and English, because the reading level of GCSE papers is 15 years and 7 months, and actually 25% of all 15-year-olds have a reading age currently of about 12 years old. So you can understand the issue with access across the curriculum, and then that doesn't even go into responding to questions and looking at command words and things. So yeah, lots to get into. SJ, what have you found to be the obstacles when it comes to engagement?
Hi, yes, sorry about
I should
that.
say welcome back as well.
Yeah, the Wi-Fi went out in the school, so I'm now on my phone. So I'm going to try my best to make this work. I apologise for disappearing. The biggest obstacle we've found with literacy has kind of been the fact that our parents on majority both work, and they're not able to give as much time to our students or kind of watch what they're doing as much as perhaps some other parents might be able to do. And so we kind of have this battle with the electronic devices. The kids want to spend a lot of time on their phones and their fancy items. We're in quite an affluent area, and the kids have everything and anything. And so actually trying to get them to push forward and want to learn something that they find not as exciting as the game that's going on their phone, in their opinion, has been quite difficult. But what we've found has really worked is buying into Ball's motivation theory, which is all about the idea that if you tell someone explicitly how it's going to benefit them, and what purpose it's going to have and what the outcomes are going to be and the vision behind it, that generally people will buy into that process if they find it worthwhile, which seems like a common sense thing when you think about it, but actually so often I find we try and make the kids do things because we're like, well, they need to know this for the course, or they need to know their vocab so they can, read for the English language paper. But we don't actually explicitly tell them and the parents where the benefit or the value is in some of the things we're doing. So when we started opening up more channels of communication between the students for literacy in particular and our English lessons, and had parents in for evenings, we started to find that buy-in and those obstacles started to melt away much more than they had before. So those were the things that we were finding on the whole.
Yes, and actually it's quite useful to sort of go through past papers of other subjects and highlight those tier two words that crop up, and for parents to be aware of that as well, because often you don't want to just dive into, okay, they're doing it for a homework and they've just not done it. That's they need that why, so what. Sabra has asked a question. I know that Joe is responding, but here we go. Yeah. How are you all, just quickly, how are you all using and implementing Bedrock in your schools? Is it sort of in school homework or anything else? Just, for Sabra.
I can start with this if you want. We at Cranbrook, every child at Key Stage 3, so year 7, 8 and 9 is paid for by the school to complete the programme, and we set it through English. We have English and literacy lessons that come under our remit, and they are expected to complete 2 lessons of Bedrock a week as a minimum, and that runs through every week for year 7, 8 and 9. We've actually had so much success with it, and our kids are chomping through the content so much that actually some of 15 of our year 9s have just had to upgrade to the GCSE content, which I'm so grateful, Bedrock, that you have, because I was really worried for a second that I'd have 15, I'd have to find something completely different for them to do. And what we do is every term we have a celebration for who has achieved the most, who has made the most progress, as well as who has completed the most lessons. And we actually have some quite nice prizes for that. Before COVID, so we've just started it up again, we were giving out Kindle Fires to the top 3 winners, Amazon prizes and so on. And it really helped to get the students to buy into the whole project when there were such prizes up for grabs. And you'd think it would be really expensive, but actually Kindle Fires now are around £30-40, and so not hugely expensive to do, but it just adds that element of competition. Sometimes those merits are not always enough for them. So yeah, Key Stage 3 every week, and then prize celebrations every term to keep the momentum going.
Nice. And I'm assuming it's homework.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's set as
yeah.
prep, absolutely. So it's compulsory prep. We have standardized, everyone does the same. We don't deviate from it, because we found that it needs to be something consistent. So every Monday, the prep launches for them we use Teams here.
Yeah.
And then by Sunday, they've got to have completed 2 Bedrock sessions minimum. We also have a process in English where if you complete your 2 sessions, you get a merit. And if you're the person who's completed the most sessions in the week in your class, you get 2 merits and a postcard home. And then obviously we have our celebrations every term as well for big key players. And actually the amount they're using it and the growth of their language. I mean, our top 10 students, some of them are getting something monumental, like 250% progress, because they're using it and engaging with it so much.
That's fantastic. That's really great. So you kind of touched on this already, but we know that when it comes to motivation, they need it sort of from all different angles, from external and internal, and not all students will have that same sort of autonomous intrinsic just yet. It's developing. It's broken down into 3: emotional, cognitive, and behavioral engagement by Ryan and Desi. I will send across the research after this, but essentially, making sure that the cognitive engagement is challenging enough and it is accessible is exactly where it needs to be, is crucial. That behavioral, so is it embedded into their habits? Is it a routine for them, which you touched on there? And emotional, so what's in it for them? Is it something they're going to want to do? So it'd be great to sort of hear how this goes into action. So how do we engage students to drive literacy improvement in our schools? It doesn't have to be Bedrock. It can be a whole range of things, because we're just sharing strategies. We will come to all those questions. There's plenty at the end. But Joe, do you want to share with us what you've been putting in place to drive to create that language rich community at Peckham, Harris Peckham, I should say?
So 3 means that I thought to just highlight for our period of time at the moment has been, on the one side, the way I talk about literacy in schools is a bit like, I talk about like an octopus, and the idea that you're trying to get your literacy octopus tentacles into everything that you can. So I'm going to show some examples actually of our Bedrock octopus and how we bring it into our personal development program, our staff briefings, our displays and our lessons, and any aspect that we can have. So online up, students having books out, just develops that culture of we all read, and that's what we're doing when we're first coming into our lessons. Through our assemblies, we explicitly teach a Bedrock word. We have a book of the week that is recommended in relationship to that subject area. So, for example, I gave an assembly 2 weeks ago on female genital mutilation, and our book of the week was a book called From a Woman Who Experienced That by Hibo Marabde. So we try to bring it into everything that we can do, but then most importantly, where we're finding the most impact is when it is embedded explicitly within the curriculum. So that actually Bedrock is part of our curriculum, that second tier vocabulary is something that is explicitly taught lesson to lesson. And with other subject areas such as maths, we treat a word, for example, like reflection or abstraction as a Bedrock word, so the students can gain a better understanding of that topic by first understanding that this word can be applied to lots of contexts outside of mathematics as well. Alongside that, then we do have sanction systems, reward systems and competition systems that are there. So we've had competitions over a school day of which forms can get the most Bedrock done. We do send texts home to remind parents if their students haven't done 2 Bedrock lessons by a particular time. And we do send texts home to reward students to say, please do reward so-and-so because they have completed their Bedrock consistently 2 times or 3 times a week over the past say term, or as a means of reward. And then the way that we approach sanction can vary. We're now at a stage in which we can start to deliver whole school detentions, but we didn't want to do this initially because really, actually, to be frank, initially the volume of students who weren't initially doing Bedrock. So first we actually targeted particular groups. So we'd have some interventions there, pupil premium students or SEN students or students who we were aware didn't have access to ICT at the time. And then gradually, as we started to get those numbers up, we can start to issue whole school detentions for essentially not doing your homework. I'm going to share my screen a little bit just to show a few examples as well, just of what this actually looks like.
As you're doing that, I should say before this, we were chatting about literacy just generally and how it's sort of an all-encompassing thing. So I like the sound of your sort of octopus there. And it kind of reminds me of what SJ was saying. There's, plenty and plenty of facets of literacy. So yeah, it'd be really interesting to see. I'll let you explain. Yeah,
so I think one of the reasons is because literacy, sometimes it's always a challenge to kind of bring it into everything that you do. And you know, often in a senior team meeting or in a middle leadership meeting, the opportunity to actually explicitly address literacy alone is rare. To be frank, I think that's the case in every school, even with us, where we value it so much. There are so many things in a busy school day. So whenever there is any initiative that's coming through, I'm just thinking, can we put Bedrock into this? Can we bring literacy? Can we bring reading into this? And so as a result, it becomes part of every aspect of our teaching. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I should also say, like, the more you do that, the more you're like, actually, learning words is the root of all knowledge, So if they can grasp those key concepts, they're going to grasp this entire lesson. And I'll let you explain.
100%, and I'll show exactly what you just said there in a moment with some stuff that we've done in RS, but we're doing across the academy as well. So on the left-hand side, this is an example of a Bedrock word being taught within a maths lesson. So the teacher had taught the etymology of the word, shown different imagery for the word, shown its application in geography in comparison to maths, and how the word interest is also has inter within it, and how that has led to the word interest existing. On the right-hand side of the screen, what you've got there is, this was last week's assembly from one of my colleagues. So she was teaching on online safety, and the Bedrock word was veil. So she taught the etymology of the word, ways it can be used, and in particular how, you know, the online world can be a bit of a veil for who a person's actual identity. So within our Peckham post, as a result, what we have is a Bedrock word of the week. So this is what's around on screens and around on our website. And we just use the noun project normally to actually capture one of the words. So that word there was resilience, and this was last summer term. And so just an imagery and the idea that that's, instead of talking about a word of the week, which I know some schools often do, we call it a Bedrock word of the week, and that's shared in briefing, that's shared in assembly, and that's shared around on screens. Then also our head teacher actually will share the Bedrock engagement across the school and praise the different members of staff who are really engaging very well. Again, this is shared with tutees as well. So when there's so as a result, it just motivates staff and spotlights Bedrock wherever we can do. We noticed, for example, as you can see on this, what you see actually on that grid is students who've done 2 lessons a week and students who've done 1 or less. So we've seen that we needed to really put some work into year 10. So we brought more spotlight onto year 10 as well in particular. This I just thought was just useful. I don't know if anyone's ever seen this image from Alex quickly, but it really captures the purpose of Bedrock and the purpose of second-tier vocabulary and schema, because it shows how these terms and ideas really they interweave with all these different subject areas. So he's talking about this in relationship to geography, but obviously there's lots of content and words, as said, that are taught within biology as well, and maybe even in a history lesson that help capture the
cross-curricular. I was just about to say, we've got a question from Hajra Bucks who said, you know, how are the Bedrock connections made in lessons? So you were giving them lists, or is it just, look, any tier 2 word is essentially a Bedrock word, just to make it easy?
So here's an example of a medium-term plan, and you'll have a 3rd tier word. The Bedrock selections will be what is a useful 2nd tier word. So it won't, ideally, I think if we were talking about in 4 or 5 years' time, or maybe 3 years' time, we could start getting to a stage where we can look at specifically what the students are learning on Bedrock and apply that in that context. And our English department do this. So our English department, our head of English has actually looked through the different year groups and identified what words students are currently on and organised her curriculum in accordance. However, here on this example, it is just selecting words that are useful to the subject area, but also can be linked to Bedrock. 2nd tier words we call Bedrock words across the board. So you'll see on this grid, for example, you've got 3rd tier words that are specific to RS, but then below that, words that could be used in many different contexts. And then what that might look like on a workbook would be this. Wow. You'd have, and within this subject area, we just use workbooks. We don't use PowerPoints as much, but it's the sense that these 2 words are the focal point.
So it must be all planned and centralized if you're using workbooks, like at the beginning of the year, you've got it all mapped out.
That's this subject area, but it could be different with other subject areas, you know. Yeah. But the sense is that when you talk about those concepts, that's then the overarching concept that would be really central. And if you think about something like Rosenshine's principles of instruction, that explanation part, when we're explaining a word, it is grounded around, when we're explaining a concept, we ground it around a word, because a word is a really good way through which a concept can actually stick as well.
Yeah, and it's sort of you can make it student friendly and explain it in tier 1 vocabulary before jumping. But I should also say, with your tier 3 there, that'd be good to put on Bedrock Mapper. Just saying. But anyway, I'll let you get on, and then ask SJ and Kelly what they've been up to too.
Yeah. One other example, just then we celebrate students' work. So if a student has used words like here, the student used the word initiation and testimony in his writing. So again, that is celebrating and highlighting when that work is used. And this is our, this goes out on the website and on screen. So students, when they realize, oh, wow, I'm going on the screen if I'm using Bedrock words, that's also celebrated. I've spoken before about this, what we call a Bedrockathon, which we did on World Book Day, which was a sort of like a whole school lesson that was done like a cheesy telethon to celebrate use of Bedrock and encourage use of Bedrock, and then there'd be set particular challenges. So working out what word this might be with the letter cues, the visuals, and I think that word was evade. Oh no, elude actually. And also what we did was our one student suggested this idea, which I thought was great. It's called the AJ challenge, a boy called AJ, and it was turning Peckham slang into Bedrock words. And students had to then turn those words together and then make a paragraph out of those. So
yeah, we had a lot of fun with that in the office.
Yeah,
I have no idea what any of those means. The language, the slang has changed since I was in the classroom.
It has changed.
It used to be like
it's looking
peak,
cool.
gassed.
Yeah,
Anyway.
peak is in there still. Yeah. So those are just some different examples, but the reason I wanted just to illustrate those was that sense of just putting it in wherever you can, whatever opportunities you can, putting into medium-term plans, putting into assemblies, putting it into staff briefings. And the more it's there, the more people are consciously aware of, and as a result, the more engagement that you can get.
Fantastic. I feel like you know, it's all about that messaging, and yeah, no, lots and lots of questions there, Joe. I tried to answer to the best of my ability, and I know that you were starting to answer some of them, but you need to press the go button, I think, for some of your responses. But really, really interesting what's been put in place there, and everyone is super interested in like how each department approaches it. So I think you've got a few questions to be going through there. SJ, would you like to go through? I know you've touched on the termly competitions and things like that. What else do you have in place?
Yes, so I've actually just completed my MBQSL project on improving literacy across the schools. So Bedrock was part of that, and then there were other areas that we worked on. What we tried to do was immerse the students and the teachers in vocabulary in every possible way we could. So we put in place word of the day, which goes into our daily notices with the word, the meaning, where it comes from. Is it a verb, an adjective, a noun, an example sentence? And teachers are putting it up as you would, displaying it. Every day's a new word. We actually, instead of taking them from Bedrock, we actually asked teachers to give us words that they felt were useful to their subjects, not subject specific vocab, not the tier 3 words, but tier 2 words that they thought the kids really should know. And there were some really interesting ones that came back, like in maths, you know, the kids really struggled with the word depreciate. And in other places like geography, they didn't know what the word arid meant. And so those were really useful for us to use. So we felt like it was really beneficial and meaningful to the subjects being taught. We also, alongside that, asked departments to come up with tier 2 glossaries to go. They're going electronically, so our children can access them, and we give them to students in lessons so that they have, they're always kind of looking over this vocab and they've got it there ready for them. We have our displays. Do you know some of the biggest advocates for literacy now in my school are maths and science and PE, who are not the subjects you would necessarily assume are the heaviest writing subjects. But we did so much pumping of the importance of vocab and the importance of literacy that so many people bought into it. And what I found interesting was Joe's comment about literacy can quite often almost be put on the back burner as if it's like, oh, it's another tick box thing. And what our colleagues hadn't quite realised, and I'm sure a lot of colleagues kind of forget in all the hubbub of daily routine, is that actually a student's grasp of literacy is one of the biggest factors in how well they actually perform in their subjects. We all have to read and write in English for our subjects. We all have to have a command of the written language and literacy and vocab in order to really fly. And what really stood out to them was the GLS report about how if you've got a verbal deficit, that actually if you've got a really high spatial or non-spatial awareness in subjects like science and maths, actually, if your verbal ability is low, you will really underperform compared to those students who actually have a high verbal understanding. And that really shocked them, because they were like, wow, it's not a hugely written subject compared to like history or English, and actually it has a massive effect on all our subjects. And so that really helped make them buy in. So as well as immersing the students in vocab, we also, our second prong was to go for teachers and really infuse them about the importance of literacy and how it was going to be of benefit to their subject in the long term. So we put together literacy, what we called literacy champions, and we tried to form ownership over moving literacy forward. So it didn't end up being my project, it ended up being 20 of our projects, because we ended up getting a literacy literacy champion, so from every department, and the idea behind that was to have someone waving that flag and having anything that happened in the literacy meetings to go back. So we always had these really fluid communication channels, and what I also found was really helpful about that is people would take on board what I said, but I'm one person, and not everyone in a school might listen to me, but actually having such a range of people going back and saying, oh, actually, no, we're doing this and it's having this benefit, and we're seeing this result. And that really helped the buy-in. I mean, the Sutton Trust say that high quality teaching and learning will add 9 months to a student's progress. And where does that come from? That comes from our staff. So if they're the ones really pushing this forward, coming to the CPD, making their glossaries, making their displays, displaying word of the day, buying into the literacy program that we have in place, then that's not just me, that's everyone hitting the children with this. I'm always really inspired by the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's very much what we've tried to do with literacy. And it's very much a whole school baby now, as opposed to just one person in the English department trying to push it forward. And so, yeah, those are the 2 prongs. Immerse the students in language, and get your staff really pumped about literacy and its importance for them and how it's going to benefit them. And we've completely revolutionised everything that we do now, and have a massive buy-in from the students and the staff, which is fantastic.
That sounds
to see,
great.
And I hope it continues.
Yeah, and actually, that also taps into that prioritizing disciplinary literacy, because I'm sure they came to your meetings with slightly different angles to things as well. So that's quite interesting. And the fully immersive, that's very much creating that culture of language-rich community, driving everything. And but you're right, it is sort of teachers driving it as well. So you've got to get them on board. Love that. So Kelly, you go.
But I was just going to say, talking about disciplinary literacy, if people who haven't already seen it, but Catherine Mortimer's book, Disciplinary Literacy, Amazon, absolutely amazing if you want to revolutionise literacy in your school, because it goes through how you would do it for different subjects and the importance of it, and so much is there, and it's really, really fantastic. So Catherine Mortimer, Disciplinary Literacy and Explicit Vocabulary Teaching. If you want some really good ideas, that's on top of this, that is a fantastic book if anyone's interested in that.
And she's quite active on Twitter. I thought Jo had read it as well, with all the sort of booklets in the RS department, because she does recommend a sort of centralized, clear curriculum. But anyway, we'll come back to that. Kelly, how have you engaged students to drive literacy improvement at Beacon Academy?
So we have kind of done a number of things. The first thing, probably kind of touching back on an earlier question, was that we use Bedrock predominantly as homework. We don't really use it too much in the classroom. And we ask that students complete in year 7 and 8 the equivalent of about 30 minutes on Bedrock a week, which usually ends up being just over 2 lessons, between sometimes about 3 lessons in year 7 and 8. And then in year 9, we ask them to spend a little bit longer and move to 45 minutes. So which again is about 4 lessons depending on how fast they work, sorry. So that's kind of our approach, and we have, as a school, the thing that students are always really aware of and is always really pushed in assemblies and in tutor time and kind of through the pastoral team is just how high our expectations are of our students, and the fact that we expect them to you know, really achieve and really apply themselves. And as part of that, we've actually taken the decision to ask students that in order for their Bedrock lessons to count as part of their homework, they have to make sure as far as possible that they achieve 80%. So that we know that they're really applying themselves, they're not just sort of clicking through and kind of, you know, putting whatever they can in some of the boxes.
So that's, sorry, 80% in each lesson?
In each lesson, yeah. And then hopefully, you know, what we have seen kind of following through from that is if they're achieving 80% in each lesson, by the time they get to the post-test, we're seeing really good progress scores and really good attainment scores. And that's kind of transferring through to the classroom where, so we're sort of similarly to what Joe and SJ have been talking about. What we're sort of doing as a school is moving away from having teachers at the front with PowerPoint. We have tried to kind of bookletize a lot of our curriculum. All of our texts that we're teaching at the moment in English are all in booklet form. And we've also been trying to really kind of follow Bedrock's lead with the high quality texts that are used as part of their homework, and really making sure that students have access to those high quality texts, both in the English classroom, but also across the curriculum as well. So, you know, like for example, in, as I'm sure a lot of other schools are doing at the moment, but for English in year 8, we've just started teaching Animal Farm, and we have a booklet of Animal Farm. It's got lots of vocabulary that's been identified either from the text or words that are really useful when you're studying that text in particular. And what we've done for that text and others as well is each student has their own copy of the booklet as we teach it, so it's got the full text in it. It's also got a glossary in it, and within that glossary we have looked at the whole Bedrock curriculum, so from blocks 7 to I think it's 12 now, isn't it? And every time one of those words crops up, we've got it in our glossary, and we've got where it comes from, along with some of the etymology of the word and a definition. And just a bit of a shout out to all of my students. Think I'm an absolute loser, but my favourite dictionary for teaching vocabulary is the Cambridge Learners Dictionary. I don't know if anyone else uses it, but it's predominantly aimed at students who either have quite low literacy or who are learning English as a foreign language. So I'm always kind of hopping on that in a lesson, or if we're using definitions, that's where we pull our definitions from, just so that we can really explain to students, you know, what this word means. And that's kind of a movement that started in English, but we're sort of trying to drive across the curriculum. We've done lots of observation of literacy and other subjects across the school, and personally, you know, myself and my colleagues, we've had lots of teachers from other departments into our lessons to kind of observe how we teach with, you know, sort of a visualizer and a booklet, and not using a PowerPoint, and really just demonstrating that it's, you know, excellent teaching and excellent subject knowledge that is really going to help to kind of close that gap with disadvantage and to make students make the most progress. The other thing that we've really been trying to do, kind of again with Bedrock and with all these glossaries and booklets of things, is really trying to explicitly teach that vocabulary. And I think this is kind of linking to what Joe said, but having really explicit teaching of vocabulary and making links between other subjects as well, and saying, you know, well, this word might have come up in history or geography or science, and if you've seen it in science, what does it mean? Does it mean the same thing? And you know, how can we turn the word into an abstract noun? How can we turn it into, how can we come up with the antonym? Can you change the prefix for me? Can you change the suffix? And really trying to pull through lots of that knowledge that students do come to us with in year 6. You know, they know the names of lots of things grammatically, but they kind of historically haven't really then used it. So we're trying to kind of build that into our classroom dialogue, and we've been really fortunate in using Bedrock and using lots of the reporting available, so things like the word trends report, to see which words your students are currently using to help that classroom dialogue. You know, if a word comes up and you know that some of them have learnt it and it's come up in their knowledge organiser, ask them, what does it mean? Can you give me a synonym? Can you give me an antonym? And really normalising that, you know, kind of, we're on the way in English, but actually that's the thing that we'd really like to do kind of from this point going forward, is to continue to do, you know, what it sounds like is happening, Joe, certainly at your school, where it's become a lot more of a something that is mentioned a lot more in other subjects. So yeah, that's kind of where we are. In terms of,
I was going to say, I like the whole building word consciousness. Sorry to interrupt. And that sort of power of practice you're talking about. You know, they're in the habit almost of going through those motions, bringing up synonyms, breaking it down, looking at etymology, because it's just embedded. The processes are embedded, and you're kind of encouraging them to be metacognitive about it. Like, how am I learning this language? Wow, there's so much, like, you know, and it links to this. So it's that consciousness creating. Yeah, sorry. What other things have you been doing? Sorry, Kelly.
yeah, sorry. So yeah, within that as well, I think the thing that's been really useful, certainly for me, just, you know, as an English teacher, is being able to have that kind of overview. And in my role as obviously as head of Key Stage 3, I do have that overview of the entire curriculum, and being able to say to students, you know, not just, oh, this will come up in science, but actually, you know, for example, I was teaching Darkness by Lord Byron earlier today with Year 9, and we talked about the word slaughter, and then I said, well, actually next year when you study Macbeth, there's that word is going to come up again, and a character is going to be slaughtered, so remember, like, keep an eye out for it. And you know, when you study Sonnet 43, we've just talked about the word enduring. Well, that's going to come up again because Barrett Browning writes about an enduring love, and I think that that's a really powerful thing to be able to do, that doesn't, you know, we're all so stretched for time, and sometimes you think, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, and actually practically it's really difficult to build a lot of these initiatives into your classroom practice. But I think things like that, just using what you've already got and using the kind of knowledge and expertise that you've already got as a classroom teacher, for me, has been really, really powerful.
It sounds like, yeah, if you've already mapped that curriculum, you know what's coming, you can give them, you can explicitly show them that you've got that deep and rich curriculum, and yeah, then you've already planted that seed. So when it comes back and you're reteaching that word, that should we move on, because I know that there's a guy called Lee who's looking at the parent engagement, and I know that's something that's always ongoing for all of us, but obviously we know it's important, and we know that our conversations with parents need to be based on teaching and learning, so it would be nice, you know, after this whole context of last year, to hear, you know, how was it that we were able to get that 360 support, if we were, with parents to drive literacy improvement, because it's not just the community, the school includes the parents, and if we can get parents on board, engaged, that can drive that language rich culture. So should we fire away? I should say thank you so much, guys. I'm like taking notes here. I'm sure people at home are. So yeah, really, really informative. So Joe, would you like to talk us through how you've managed with the parents, and what sort of strategies you've used and what's been helpful?
Yep. So a few practices that we've done that have been effective. First part is actually getting parents to sign up to Bedrock, and we did quite a push in particular over lockdown, where we might call the parent or speak with the parent and actually walk through the processes. I think you said something earlier there, SJ, about sort of like kind of fool's theory or something. The sense that you really go step by step through each stage for what needs to be done to actually engage Bedrock, because it can be a bit of a clunky process, but I understand that's helpful, and also for them to understand the benefit of that. Just say a note, you know, that will mean that you'll probably get more messages saying that Jimmy is doing their Bedrock rather than not. So on that's one part, but then also the other side is, if the parent permits, you know, just to sign them up ourselves if they're really kind of, particularly if there are EAL issues or access issues, we can say, look, I can make this much easier for you, and we can sign you up as long as you give permission, and then I can just schedule for some parents just to be signed up on our behalf. So that can be used. During lockdown, part of the tutor calls involved questioning about Bedrock, just to make sure that students were engaged with it, and if they weren't, just to walk them through again how to access this. But what is particularly effective, which is the text tone. So a Monday reminder, that's a blanket text to all parents, and then a Wednesday differed message, which will either be your child has done 2, your child has done 1, or your child has not done the Bedrock, just to kind of prompt the parent to ensure their engagement.
You must have a great admin team.
Do you know what?
Or is it all sort of tech?
It's not that difficult. We use Bromcom, but I feel like some reason, and it's like through the sort of school interface systems, it is a select all. Well, what we do is we download the Bedrock data at that time, and then we click out the students who've done it. They get one text. The ones who have not done it get another text. And the message to all parents is literally just a blanket message. It doesn't take too long a period of time. In fact, though, however, I've got there's one fantastic PA, and she has sent a delayed delivery over the half term. So the parents will be receiving just a reminder that they should be doing their Bedrock over half term as well. But that engagement, some parents get annoyed by it. Most parents really appreciate it because it just allows them to think about what their students are doing.
And actually, they don't have to log on to their dashboard. They're not, it's there, okay, in the midst of their busy day.
Absolutely.
It's a nudge, I guess.
Yeah, it's a nudge, and that's what they want, and that's what they actually asked for as well when we spoke to them. They just wanted a bit of a nudge so that they can remember to remind their child. And the message that we say is that they do Bedrock when they get home. So it's like one of the first things they have. So it's part of the home routine.
Yeah, very habitual.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry. You go.
We also share the impact. So now that we've got data about the impact of Bedrock, to send a letter home to say, Bobby has done Bedrock consistently 2 lessons a week, and now they're really seeing the benefits of this. Their reading age has now gone up by 2 years, and obviously for a parent that just makes them feel like a good person.
Yeah, that's triangulating it with the NGRT test.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's not just the pre and post test, which is that growth, but you're also showing impact on reading. Okay. I know United Learning do that as well.
Yeah. The last thing I'd say is that we're thinking of doing, now that we're doing parents' evenings will be live again. We haven't yet had our 7s to 10s in yet, but we're thinking of actually getting the parents who haven't signed up yet signed up on that day. So that will help us with engagement with parents, and possibly also like a whole parent assembly prior to the actual evening of talking to parents as well.
That sounds really interesting. And actually, I know, SJ, you have been known to do some parent conferences, haven't you, in the evening? So do you want to sort of talk through how you've engaged parents to drive whole school literacy and to get them involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, Alex Randle kindly came and helped us with one of our parents' information evenings. I think one of the things to recognise first is that a lot of parents do want to help their child, and they want their child to do the best they possibly can, but they just don't know how to help. They're not teaching specialists. They don't have an awful lot of time, a lot of them, and so giving them practical things that they can actually do, clear communication with parents, we found really, really helpful. And what we've looked into doing is to try and upskill our parents so that they can be more helpful at home and have a better understanding of literacy and English, because that's my subject, in order to help their children. So we have had Bedrock information evenings, which I'm hoping to do more of those now that we're out of the pandemic. They come and they, again, it's about pushing that purpose and that motivation and getting them invested. So at Sunday lunch, they go, oh, little Johnny, have you actually done your Bedrock this week? Trying to get that involvement going. In our parents' evenings, each year group, the subjects hand out a handout of top tips, and in the English one we've added a literacy page of top tips, so each year group gets that yearly of things that are practical that parents and children can do together, or parents can oversee in order to help boost their literacy skills. And that goes from all sorts of things, from handwriting to vocab, to sitting and talking about a newspaper article, to guidebooks and things like that they can use. There's a whole range of things there. And we've also invited parents in to be upskilled, so to actually have them in almost as if they're a year 11 class, and to teach them through some of the key factors that we need kids to know and be better at. And that's been really effective. A lot of parents have found that really helpful and really enjoyed it, and they feel they can go home and help their children with their homework and their learning. And one thing we're also working on at the moment is a page for our website that is literacy based, with top tips, almost a bit like a blog on literacy. which will hopefully be up and running next term, where again people can go for advice and ideas and who to contact in the school for support, where to go for outside support, kind of top tips again. So there's lots of opportunities for our parents to be involved, to be given practical solutions, and like I said, to kind of upskill them so that they can help their children as much as possible. And I find that the more they know what to do, the more they want to get involved, because obviously if you feel like you can contribute positively, then obviously that's more motivation. So those are just a few of the things that we've been doing to try and engage our parents as much as possible.
Yeah, I also think, you know, in the run up to Christmas, they love a sort of stocking filler recommended reads list as well that links to what you're teaching, so it sort of embeds that. Kelly, how are you engaging parents to sort of drive whole school literacy?
So kind of, I'd start just kind of controversially by saying, actually, I was talking about this with my head of department earlier. And, you know, we were talking through lots of the strategies that we use to engage parents. And I think the kind of issue for us that we have found is being a school where we have, you know, a kind of variety of students who are disadvantaged in some way, be it whether or not they are PP students or, you know, just some other kind of disadvantage. Actually, we have found that, you know, in our cohort with our students, parent engagement actually sometimes widens that gap, and we find that the ones who have a lot, you know, parents buy into Bedrock and they find that they want to monitor, they want to log on to the parent portal and create their own account, and they're the ones with the children who are going to do quite well anyway and who are already doing their Bedrock. And the ones that we've found quite difficult to engage are the parents that we've mentioned earlier, you know, the ones who potentially maybe haven't had a very good experience of education themselves, are, you know, just very, very busy, they work very long hours. And it's trying to tackle some of those parents, and that's kind of been our challenge, I would say, over the last couple of years, and really trying to sort of target that core of students who just don't do homework, and they don't do homework across the curriculum. And the thing that we've really tried to do is to be very mindful of that during our communication. And, you know, we have, as with lots of schools, lots and lots of different ways to send huge numbers of emails, quite lengthy emails, quite detailed emails about Bedrock, about the programme. And actually, that hasn't been hugely successful for us in the past. And what we are starting to move towards now, similarly to what SJ is talking about, is parent information evenings, where we invite parents and we, you know, create either a kind of like a webinar or a remote sort of video, and are able to send it to them, and they can watch it at their leisure, and it sort of explains what Bedrock is and why we use it. And we found that, you know, in some ways, if we're doing that and then we're also in contact with parents as a classroom teacher, then we're trying to sort of target as many parents with as many kind of different reasons for maybe not being so engaged in their child's learning. The other thing that has been really, really helpful for us is, and I do have to just mention kind of all of the resources that we're provided with from Bedrock in the starter pack. So things like there's a PDF kind of PowerPoint presentation, shows parents really clearly with really nice visuals how to log on, how to create a parent account. There's an email that you can ask your admin team to sort of do a mail merge and mail merge all the student details.
Have you put that on your website?
We haven't yet. We're actually redeveloping large areas of the website. So it's in the process of going at the moment. And I think that the difficulty is that for us is going to be emails that are letters, that are printed and given to students in the hope that they don't just end up in a bag somewhere, you know, until Easter or whatever. So we're doing that. And then we also, similarly to what Jo mentioned, we don't have a text message system, but we use a program called EduLink to set and monitor all of our homework and do all of our registers and all bits like that. And that actually has the facility to create email templates and to send blanket messages home to parents with differentiated information for things like student names and bits like that. So we have all of our deadlines for homework on a Monday, and if on the Friday prior to that students haven't yet met our expectation, we'll send a little email to parents just saying, I've made sure the first line of it literally says, this is a friendly reminder, please don't panic, but, you know, just to let you know your child hasn't yet completed their Bedrock homework. They've got plenty of time to do it. This is what they need to do. Because, you know, as SJ said, I think parents are supportive and they do really want to help, but sometimes certainly what we found in our context is that they panic and they think that, you know, if their child isn't meeting the expectation or is going to receive a detention, that then completely changes our view of them as teachers, which obviously we know is completely not the case. So yeah, it's all about kind of trying to do that. And I'm just trying to think if there is anything else that I wanted to add. Yeah, I think really for us, it's been a lot about putting a lot of that time and energy into that parental relationship when they come to us in year 7. And as we use Bedrock in year 7, 8 and 9, once they are aware of that expectation in year 7 and we've sort of had that initial conversation, be it over email or a phone call, you know, speaking about why their son, daughter hasn't met the homework expectation, what they need to do, what the expectation is going forward, we found that has been really, really helpful in terms of engagement.
Excellent. And it's like having a captive audience on open days, induction days. And I know lots of schools like Blenheim High School, they'll have a couple of students in the reception just working through Bedrock. So, you know, parents can say, oh, what's that? If you don't have the time or you don't have parents actually attending necessarily, or the, you know, the age-old ones that you need to speak with. We are up to now, but we've got lots of like interesting questions. So I know that you were asked, Joe, about, you know, how you've measured your progress. We did sort of cover that, I guess. And yeah, why we start with block 3, because it's really focusing on comprehension. So if decoding is an area, it's developing that and giving them that support, and then, you know, being able to access Bedrock. But just double check that I don't have anything. We did have, so this is essentially, I would just like each of you to just sort of pinpoint what you would say for everyone going away from this webinar. What are your main takeaways when it comes to engagement? Joe, do you want to give us, you know, as short as you possibly can, your main takeaway, and then we'll go SJ and Kelly again. Thanks.
So I'd say make Bedrock a habit, embed it into every area of school culture, and use Bedrock language.
Thank you. SJ, do you want to give us your consolidate what we've learned today?
Well, I think instead of repeating, you know, the actual literacy things, I think what my main takeaway is how to get it across. And for me, that has been, what's the purpose? Clear and concise communication with all stakeholders, your students, your staff, your parents, and have really in your mind what your vision is for literacy. What is your long-term plan for the school and literacy? What are your clear outcomes? And you're always working towards those. Otherwise, it can be such a big unwieldy sort of wieldy beast, literacy, because it takes over so much of a school, really, when you sit down and think about it in detail. That having that really clear what you want to achieve and where you want this to go was really important for me when talking about literacy and how to make sure that it's fundamental in the school and it's seen that way.
I love that. And also what you said earlier, the fully immersive, I like that phrase too. So clear purpose, fully immersive, and yeah, a sort of a timeline and goals, kind of fundamental. Kelly, would you like to conclude what your takeaways are?
Yeah, I will do. I think for me, it's all about the kind of why behind it and that intrinsic motivation for students. You know, this is why we've put this program in place. It's not just because we couldn't be bothered to make up homework for you anymore. Actually, this is going to make you successful, and this is going to make sure that you are able to achieve the qualifications that you need to achieve. And you're able to have, you know, a fruitful and enjoyable career, and you're able to kind of hold your own and stand, you know, against students who've had absolutely fantastic educations across the world. And for me, that is something that I'm always very passionately, you know, kind of drumming into all students that I teach.
Like that, the high expectations, high aspirations for our students, and just reminding them again, this is the purpose, and this is why we do what we do. Thank you so much, guys, and it's really, really inspiring to listen to all of you and what you've been doing to ensure that you've created that language-rich culture in your communities. And Yes, I'm hoping we'll have a couple of case studies from both Beacon and Cranbrook School. But if anyone wants to check out the one on Peckham, Harris Peckham, it's there. But thank you very much for everyone that attended. I hope it's been insightful, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.